Whether you're a rye whiskey drinker or not, you have undoubtedly heard about Sazerac, parent company of Buffalo Trace, and a pretty common, popular to find rye because, as we know with a lot of Buffalo Trace products and Sazerac products, they're not as well distributed as they should be. For reasons. However, recently, Sazerac has expanded their line to include 100 proof and this bad boy, the Sazerac Rye 125 proof, full-proof version. Now, there's a big joke in the community that this is basically just Thomas H. Handy without it being quite as barrel selected and maybe not quite as old, but Handy's only typically 6 years old, so the real question is, can this $40 bottle deliver a level of flavor that would make you just ignore even trying to find Thomas H. Handy? Let's find out on 2 Minute Tuesday. A caveat. It is well known in my group of friends, a lot of the Washington whiskey community that knows who I am, that my palate is really sensitive to rye. And by really sensitive, I mean almost everything tastes like toothpaste to me. I know. But there are some ryes that I've had that I find particularly delicious. Michter's usually is the king. Some of the other rye products that are out there, typically finished ryes, are very, very good. I've had basic Sazerac, and the one that I'm going to actually use as a comparison today is a pick from one of my favorite places, the Ballard Cut. So you gotta assume a pick Sazerac's gotta be just a little bit better. But the real question is, how much flavor can we get out of this 125 proof, full-proof version? Good cork pop. I recently had a comment actually asking why I do the cork pop, and let me actually give a small explanation beyond the fact that it's just fun. When you have a solid cork, right? When it does that, that's a good seal. When you have really quiet corks, that could be a risk of the seal not being as good, which means that once you finally open it for the first time, you might have more continuous air hitting your whiskey, which means that it could oxidize and you might not have that great flavor for very long. So if you don't have a solid cork pop, you might consider either A, finding a replacement cork, or B, drinking that thing relatively quickly. As I said, I'm not a huge rye person, but we'll try it anyway. We'll see what my palate gets. If I get anything other than heavily mint forward flavor, that's usually a positive in the rye category for me. But in the end, this just adds a rye to my selection that if any of my friends ever want to try it, I'm more than happy, because at only $40 a bottle, this could be one of the best deals in rye whiskey out there. So with that being said, let's get into our tasting notes. Start with color. We got a nice, lovely color on this. Some okay legs. They're not forming super well. Let's get in the nose. Kind of first things I'm getting on the nose, a little bit of mint, but also a little bit of double bubble gum, which I think is kind of funny because usually I don't get something like that out of rye. There's definitely some spice coming in, probably kind of a cinnamon and nutmeg thing. You're generic, like everybody was a baking spice, right? It's a little bit of that going on. What I'm kind of surprised by is that despite it being 125 proof, and we know that rye is not aged a whole ton typically, there's no age statement on it, so this is just a guess, but it is non-chill filtered, so that helps. But the thing is, it's not really overwhelming with the proof. There's not a big ethanol hit or anything that would indicate it being very hot on the nose. Let's see if that translates over to the palate. You feel that 125 proof. It's not ethanol-y, but it's more got a pretty strong hug going on. It's got a very hot cinnamon candy kind of thing coming in. There's definitely a little bit of that bubble gum and mint. I don't get any of the things that we would call the signature Buffalo Trace, that kind of grape or cherry fruitiness to it, but you would expect that out of the bourbons. The ryes are going to be a little bit different. There is also something that's a little youthful, kind of bready going on in here, so you could think more like a rye bread. Oh wow, yeah, that cinnamon note is just here the whole way. The mint kind of comes in the mid palate, but the cinnamon is up front and all the way through the finish. The finish lingers pretty well. It's got some decent viscosity and it's coating my tongue and my palate pretty well, but it's really cinnamon forward for me, which compared to the nose, there was some there, but not hot cinnamon. So I'm surprised at how much more prevalent it is on the palate compared to what I was experiencing on the nose. As I have a few more sips, the other thing that's kind of coming in toward the end is this really subtle little red delicious apple kind of thing going in. So more standard, boring apple, nothing overly sweet, but it's definitely got a little kind of appley thing going in there. Let's get into an overall score for the Sazerac Rye full proof. I'm going to rate this a 67. I want to give a big caveat here to that 67. The big thing for me is not that it's oh, Bentley doesn't like rye. It's more that on the nose, the spice level was a little more tame, and when it gets on my palate, that hot cinnamon is really just the dominant prevailing note, and there's none of that kind of bubblegummy minty thing being the dominant note that I would expect out of a rye, or in particular what I was getting out of the nose on this. So that difference is a little interesting, and I naturally am not a big hot cinnamon person, if you like a more spice-forward rye, you might want to check this bad boy out, because these things are like $37 to $40 MSRP. That's pretty good for a foolproof rye, especially coming out of Buffalo Trace. I'm not a big rye drinker. It tends to hit my palate really weird, with some rare exceptions. For like a $38 bottle, I think a bunch of my friends came in a group buy and bought these like $40 with shipping. It's a really good deal because it hasn't hit my state yet. So this is actually pretty good. It does remind me a little of Thomas H. Handy. And I know it's going to sound weird, and what I mean is that kind of big in-your-face flavor that Thomas Handy has. It certainly isn't nearly as complex or anything like that. So very interesting. I'm actually kind of impressed, given that this is a $40, 125 proof rye from Sazerac. There's quite a bit of lingering flavor, although it does hit me pretty hard with that hot cinnamon, which is not something that is really a big like thumbs up on my palate typically. However, it is not like killing my ability to taste anything else. So that is a little bit of a positive there, that I get to taste other things and it's not overwhelming my palate. Should you hunt this? Well, it's supposed to be pretty shelf available, so you shouldn't have to hunt it. The first wave might be kind of hard to find, but there's been a number of online retailers that have had it if you're not getting it at your local store. So you might consider looking online. I think we got ours in my group of friends through High Proof, if I remember correctly. It might have been Remedy, one of the bigger ones that's very reputable online that does good business on their shelf products. They're usually a pretty good deal, including the shipping. But let's compare that to the basic Sazerac Rye. Even though this is a pick, I still think it's relevant to compare it. Now granted, we're talking a big difference in proof. This is only 90 proof with the basic Sazerac. And a lot of people buy Sazerac more as a mixer. They're mixing this to make all sorts of cocktails, etc., including the classic Sazerac cocktail. I want to see how much different the palate is of that 90 proof and the like more original Sazerac thing, so that if you are somebody who likes Sazerac, that might influence you a little bit, even with my weird palate when it comes to ryes compared to the full proof. So real fast, let's do the nose. I mean, very tame on the nose, but a lot more mint forward, and a little bit of that bubblegum. There's a little bit of bubblegum in this one too. So that is at least prevailing through the whole Sazerac line for my nose, but you know, results may vary. Man, it's definitely 90 proof compared to this 125 proof monster over here, where it's much softer and more mellow and gentle on my palate. There's really almost none of that kind of baking spice thing going forward. That hot cinnamon I was getting out of the full proof, that's not there. That mint and bubblegum are definitely present, but so is a little touch of that apple note. It's a bit more on the kind of like desserty end in the lower proof than it is with this bad boy, just because that cinnamon was hitting me so hard. And a lot of that's probably just the 35-point difference in proof. Regular Sazerac is very, very mellow, very chill, and if you like rye, it's not a bad choice. Would I prefer to have this over the standard Sazerac, considering what the standard price is to pick it up? Probably, and it would make me really curious to know what the 100 proof is like, because it's a little more tamed down from that 125, but you got a little bit more umph than that basic 90 proof, so you're probably getting an elevated level of flavor for not a lot of a difference. I think those are like a $30 bottle. So depending on whether you want something that's a bit more in your face or not, you might want to look for the 100 proof if you want something a bit more easy. And if you really want that big, bold, in your face flavor, you might want to track down the full proof instead. So that's it. That's my review. I hope you've enjoyed this, even though I'm not a big rye drinker just because of how my palate interprets ryes. So I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Have you had the new Sazerac full proof, or have you had the 100 proof? I want to hear what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Or maybe just tell me, what's your favorite rye? Don't go crazy. Don't be like, oh, I only drink Thomas H. Handy and all these expensive ryes. If you're getting something off the shelf, what's your sipper rye that you like to go to? MGP 95.5? Maybe you're more of a Sagamore rye drinker? I want to know from you in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. When we hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to give away a bottle of H. Taylor Single Barrel, as well as a small batch, and a few other things as well. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome.